everyone, and welcome back to the Winning Agenda. My name's Jesse Muleman Marshall, and today we are diving back into the contested realm with Sorcery Contested Realms to talk about the top 10 alpha sites. So I hope you enjoyed the discussion the other day of the top 10 spells, which are the cards, of course, in Sorcery that you cast with your mana. Today we're going to be talking about the cards that give you your mana, or have some other fantastic abilities as well. So the top 10 sites in Alpha is, I guess, a really special part of what makes Sorcery great. The sites themselves, unlike in a lot of other games, a lot of us who've played Magic before, for example, you might have some favorite lands that you like getting into play. You might have some dual lands or some, particularly nice looking fetch lands or shock lands that you like getting into play. And it's always nice to stare down at your board and see, really pretty artwork and things like that. But with Sorcery, you get that same experience, but it goes a step further because your sites not only give you mana and not only appear on the board, but they themselves make up the physical game board that you play on. So as you develop your sites and as you develop your board across the grid, you're placing sites into each of the spaces on the grid and sort of painting out your own collage, if you like, using these fantastic pieces of art. So we're going to dive straight into the list, but I just wanted to call that out because I think the role of sites within Sorcery is something really special and something that makes the game really sing. So we're going to have a quick look here at where you can get sites in the pack. So just like every other card, being the spells in the pack, you get sites at the same rarity distribution. So when you see a site, it will have a capitalized word in the type line that will either be ordinary, elite, exceptional, or unique. Slightly wrong order. Ordinary, exceptional, elite, unique in that order from lowest rarity to highest rarity. And you can see here in the pack that there are 3 exceptional cards. So you've got 3 shots at getting any of the exceptional sites. Those cards can be sites or spells. Then you've got an elite card, which can in some packs be replaced with a unique card. And that again can be either a spellbook or a site card. So the unique sites and the elite sites will be in that slot. And then you've got the ordinary slots, and then you've got the basic site slot at the end, some of which will be replaced by avatars. So you do have a lot of opportunities to get sites in the packs. It's just that if you have a look at the distribution of cards within the alpha set, there are fewer sites than there are spells, so the majority of the cards in each of these slots in your packs is going to be made up of spellbook cards. So we'll dive into the honourable mentions first. So shout out to Angleworm, who commented on the previous spellbook video asking for some honourable mentions. So here you go. The honourable mentions are the cards that were 11th, 12th and 13th on this list, so didn't quite make the top 10. Bottomless Pit, a very powerful neutral site, if you like, doesn't have any threshold. It still generates a mana, so cards that have no elemental threshold still generate mana. They just don't give you the coloured mana, if you like, that lets you cast your elemental cards. So you can still use it to play your cards, it's just that it can't help you meet your threshold requirements. But the ability on this site, it's an elite site, is that whenever a non-airborne minion, so any minion on the ground, enters this site, kill it. So it's very powerful. You can have 2 of them in your deck because it's elite, and if you can get a couple of these out early, it can be very hard for your opponent to successfully attack you and deal damage to your sites, and it can at least make them go around the long way, which can in some cases give you quite a significant strategic advantage. Number 2 on the honourable mentions list is Island Leviathan with, I should have mentioned the Dan Seagrave art, which is gorgeous on Bottomless Pit. Maybe not gorgeous is the wrong word. It's very detailed and incredibly beautiful, but quite grisly as well. Island Leviathan, we've got some really nice Drew Tucker art. Drew Tucker, of course, an original Magic the Gathering artist. And the Island Leviathan has an ability that says when you have 8 water threshold, you can transform it into a monster as an activated ability, and you place a flooded rubble underneath. So basically the Island Leviathan wakes up once you get to 8 threshold at any point on your turn that you want it to, and then it becomes an 8 power minion that can walk around and bash your opponent. So it's again an elite site, and a site that can become such a powerful minion, like 8 power, is really, really strong. This did get changed from, I think, 6 to 8 threshold requirement during the playtesting for Alpha, and I think at 6 it was excellent. At 8, it's just a little bit slow in the current metagame. So we'll see if there become more ways to get water threshold outside of sites so you can get there significantly ahead of turn 8 reliably. Then Island Leviathan might come up the list a bit more, but at the moment it just sits here on the honourable mentions. Maelstrom is a unique site of ineluctable Malevolence. There you go. At the start of your turn, you may pull in each minion in this body of water 1 step. So it's a water site, just like Isle Leviathan gives you a water threshold. But the ability to rearrange or push, right, it has to be pull, so it has to go towards the Maelstrom. But the ability to rearrange and pull every every minion, so it doesn't work on avatars, within a particular body of water is very powerful in a water deck. Because generally a water deck at the moment with the whole body of water mechanic is going to be wanting to play almost exclusively water sites. So almost every site on your side of the board is going to be part of the same body of water as Maelstrom. And you have this option that at the start of your turn, you can reposition your units or drag your opponent's units towards the Maelstrom 1 step, which can really make it hard for them to stay out of range and can help you to set up some good counterattacks if they do venture onto your side of the board. So Maelstrom, definitely a powerful one, but just because water is not really that strong at the moment and Maelstrom doesn't really have enough support and enough pieces to go with it, it unfortunately finds itself on the honourable mentions list. So number 10, diving straight into the top 10 here now, we've got Humble Village and the other villages in the basic Earth site roster. So Humble Village is an ordinary site of abundance. This is, as I said, one of the basic Earth sites, so you'll find it in that last slot in the booster packs. They'll be quite easy to come by, and you can include up to 4 of them in your deck and up to 12 total with the same effect. So there are 3 different villages, they all have the same effect, and you can play 4 of each of them. So you can have 12 of these out of your 20 site atlas, which means that your over 50% of your atlas deck is going to be made up of this same effect if you choose to have that happen. So it says, Genesis, you may pay 1 mana to summon a Foot Soldier token here. And a Foot Soldier token is just a 1 power minion token. But what this effectively means is that for the price of foregoing the mana from the first turn that this comes into play, you can turn that mana into a 1/1 creature token or 1/1 minion token. And that's a pretty powerful ability. It's a decent blocker. You know, having a Foot Soldier can work really well for defensive Earth decks to stop early rushes, because it just basically means you can block for free with that Foot Soldier as soon as it's summoned, as soon as your opponent starts encroaching on your sites and making their first attacks. But it can also be a great source of attacking power as well. You're basically getting a free extra damage every turn as long as they don't deal with your Foot Soldier. So a lot to be said for villages, and the Humble Village is a very powerful effect. Number 9, we've got Holy Ground, an exceptional Earth site of benefaction and blessings. It says, Genesis, each nearby avatar heals 3 life. So this card is an excellent piece in the Earth, in any Earth mid-range strategy that's looking to deal with early aggression, perhaps from Voidwalk minions or something else, and keep its life total high enough that it can get its more powerful, expensive Earth minions and spells online. So Earth's got some really great mid-range minions with power sort of 4 and 5 that can quickly take over the board, but it doesn't necessarily have the greatest plays on turn 1, 2, and 3, other than, of course, spending the mana on its villages to get some blockers out. Holy Ground just really plays well and synergizes nicely with villages. If you do happen to take a bit of damage early, you can just gain it back with your Holy Grounds, and you can have 3 of these in your deck. Worth noting on Sorcery, you can't gain life above your starting life total. You can only heal life that you've already lost, and you also can't heal once you're at death's door. So it has to be in that intervening period once you've already taken some damage and you're looking to heal up, but you haven't yet reached death's door. That's when Holy Ground works. The fact that it doesn't work, before you've taken damage or while you're at death's door means that it's not, the most powerful card, and it's not at the top of the list, but the ability to gain 3 life, which is a decent chunk, just for playing a site is a pretty powerful one to have. Number 8 is Pillar of Xeros, a unique site of Forgotten Aeons. So it says, it's another Earth site, and it says, Genesis, banish all dead minions, and you heal 1 life for each. So this banishes all dead minions from every player's cemetery, and you heal 1 life for each of those minions that you banish. So this, of course, has 2 pieces of utility. One is getting rid of things that your opponent might want to reanimate, and Death Speaker, which is an avatar that has a reanimate ability on it, is one of the best and most powerful minions in the alpha metagame. So being able to hose them with a Pillar of Xeros is really, really good in the mid game, and also healing up some life that you might have lost along the way. both in the Death Speaker matchup, but also in other matchups where your opponent is playing minions or where you've got minions that have gone to the graveyard, it's basically holy ground, but likely to be slightly better. And it doesn't have the risk like Holy Ground does of potentially hitting both you and your opponent or being a bit awkward in that way, because it just says you heal 1 life rather than nearby avatars. So Pillar of Xeros slots in at number 8. Number 7, we've got Gnome Hollows, another Earth site, so it's an exceptional site of quaint construction. It says units with 3 or more power can't enter this site. And the wording of can't enter is just so powerful and so strong to be able to completely stop your opponent's battle mage avatar, because an avatar is a unit, or any of their 3 power minions, 3 or greater power minions, from entering this site. On an exceptional, meaning you can have 3 of these in your deck, means between this and Bottomless Pit, you can construct a control deck that makes it very difficult for your opponent to have any decent sized attackers enter your side of the board and attack your sites. So Gnome Hollows, Bottomless Pit, a few of the other control sites which we've seen and will see in this list, allow you to conceivably construct a really control-oriented atlas that's going to make aggression from your opponent really difficult. Number 6 on the list is Cloud City, another really great utility site. It's unique, so you can only have 1 in your deck. It's an air site, and it's got the ability 3 air thresholds, so that just means as soon as you've got 3 air threshold on the board, once on your turn, this site may fly to a nearby void. And this ability sounds a bit innocuous, and it doesn't necessarily leap off the page as the most powerful thing, but being able to fly nearby means you can fly diagonally, and being able to move this site means that you can, particularly if you're playing an avatar that wants to get close to the opponent as soon as possible in the game, so something like a battle mage, if you can start with a Cloud City and then on turn 3 be moving your battle mage without having to spend any cards, so any spells or anything else, closer to your opponent, that can be a really powerful effect. But there's of course lots of other things you can do. You can run away with the Cloud City, so you can put your avatar on it and then you can hike it over into the corner and make it really difficult for your opponent to get to you. You can even fly away into a corner and box yourself so there's a void space between you and each of the other sites, and it's all your sites around you. That's kind of a convoluted way to explain it, but what you can basically do is make it so your avatar is isolated in a corner and your opponent can't actually place any sites close or adjacent to that site, meaning they can't walk their minions over because you've sort of boxed yourself in with your own sites, but you've left this little moat of void in between your other sites and the Cloud City in the corner. And that can mean that if your opponent doesn't have something like a teleport or potentially a blink, they may actually not be able to reach your avatar to deal the death blow, and they may be reliant on things like Lightning Bolt to finish you off. So Cloud City can be really powerful, has an effect that's just really unique in the game, and mobility in this game is more impactful and powerful than you think it is. I'll put it that way. Number 5 is Dark Tower. So this is another one of a basic site cycle. So this is the air basic sites, and it says it's an ordinary site of contemplation, and it says Genesis, if this is the only Dark Tower you control, gain 1 mana this turn. The towers did get a nerf in alpha playtesting believe it or not, before the nerf, they each gave you an extra mana, regardless of whether it was the first one of that type you had in play, which just meant that towers were this ridiculous mana acceleration engine. Thankfully, they've been toned down a little bit, but still, on turn 1, if you play a tower, you're guaranteed to have 2 mana because it'll be the first one of that type that you've played. And then very likely on turn 2 and 3, or 2, 3, 4, on one or more of those turns, you're likely to have one of the other towers, because there's a Lone Tower and Gothic Tower are the other 2 basic towers. So the first time you play a Dark Tower, you get 2 mana, and then if your next site is a Gothic Tower, you'll get 2 mana from that one as well. Of course, you only get 2 mana on the turn that they come into play, but it basically means you can go turn 1, 2 mana, turn 2, 3 mana, turn 3, 4 mana, so you're just 1 ahead of the curve each turn, which is a very powerful place to be. So the towers just allow some explosive aggression, they allow some plays that are just that little bit ahead of the curve, and I think anyone who's played games like Sorcery that rely on that sort of resource curve and mana cost to gate you from playing different cards until certain points in the game knows that if you can be somewhat consistently above that curve, you're likely to be in a very advantageous position. And towers, for very little cost, allow you to do that. So towers, for me, are in at number 5 on the top 10 site list. Number 4 is the Color Out of Space. It's a unique non-Euclidean site. It produces threshold of every color. So it produces earth, fire, water, and air threshold, but it provides no mana or threshold if it's not adjacent to the void. So you have to always leave a space in front, behind, or left or right of this site that is void and is not filled by another site, otherwise it gets turned off. But that is sort of a quite small drawback compared to the flexibility that you get of having essentially a 4-color site in your deck, and the flexibility in the early game that you get of being able to play, particularly in a 2 or even 3-color deck, a range of different spells that would otherwise be a bit more challenging. So basically the color fixing from the Color Out of Space puts it in at number 4 on the list. Very, very powerful effect, and a drawback that you can mitigate, and even when it does get turned off, usually you're at a point in the game where hopefully it doesn't matter all that much. Number 3 on the list, so getting into the top 3 now, is Free City. An exceptional site kneels before none. So this is the only site, I think, other than Island Leviathan, which was in the honorable mentions list, that has a power rating. So this is power 3, and it says once per turn it may attack or defend against enemy units here. And unlike Island Leviathan, which can only use its 8 power once it's animated into a minion, Free City is actually able to attack and defend as a site. And the ability to do that puts it significantly ahead of Island Leviathan, even though it's lower power, 3 versus 8. Firstly, you get it from the start of the game, not having to get to 8 water threshold. But secondly, it can't be killed by your opponent as a minion. So Island Leviathan, once it animates, it can actually just be destroyed like any other minion. Whereas Free City, even when it participates in combat, it deals its damage, but it doesn't get dealt damage back because it's not a minion. So what that means is that if there is an enemy minion on this site, you can attack it and it doesn't take any damage back. Similarly, if an opponent tries to attack this site, you can actually defend with the Free City, and that cancels out the damage from that one attack. So a very, very powerful effect, an exceptional site. The downside is that it doesn't have any threshold, so it doesn't add to your color. The color in your deck, the color requirement, the threshold requirement for playing your spells. But if you are going to play a few sites that don't have threshold and don't generate threshold, I think Free City is one that you should certainly consider, because the effect, very much like Bottomless Pit and Gnome Hollows, is very powerful defensively. It's hard to attack onto the Free City, but you can also attack enemy minions that do find their way there with the Free City itself, and it's exceptional, so you can have 3 of them. So very, very powerful. Number 2 is the Geist Wood, a unique site of denied absolution. So the Geist Wood, aside from the very interesting and grotesque Ian Miller art going on there, another classic Magic the Gathering artist, or just fantasy artist in general, Ian Miller, it says Genesis abilities here are also Deathrite abilities. And the reason that this has sort of skyrocketed its way up to number 2 is partly because of how powerful some of the Genesis abilities are in Alpha. So the Genesis ability on Grandmaster Wizard, for example, to draw 3 cards when it enters the realm. The ability on the Geist Wood to also draw those 3 cards when the Grandmaster Wizard dies, that's amazing. If you think about how much you pay in mana terms for the Genesis ability on cards like Grandmaster Wizard or even Death Dealer, Apprentice Wizard, really any of those cards that have a very, very strong Genesis ability and are otherwise pretty weak minions, you're paying most of the mana cost for the Genesis, not the minion itself. So if you can, for no extra mana, double the return that you get from that Genesis ability, the Geist Wood is effectively giving you 5, maybe 6 mana worth of power from a Grandmaster Wizard dying here, and it's not costing you another card. So your 1 Grandmaster Wizard card and your 6 mana investment can turn, if you play it onto the Geist Wood, into draw 3 cards, then draw another 3 cards when it dies. So draw 6. And that's a net gain of +5 cards for the cost of 6 mana and a card. That's just unheard of in the game. Nothing else can even come close to giving you that. And if you can get that advantage, particularly repeatedly, with things like Apprentice Wizards and even Vile Imps, for example, with some extra damage, then the Geist Wood can quickly get away from your opponent in terms of the value that it's generating for you. Of course, this works best in Death Speaker because Death Speaker has that natural synergy with Genesis abilities, but really it works well in a range of other decks as well. So the Geist Wood, definitely one I'd encourage you to try out if you are a deck that's playing things like Apprentice Wizard and Grandmaster Wizard. So number 1 on the list, made our way all the way to number 1, and of course it is the exceptional dual sights. So these sights, much like the Color Out of Space, which came in I think at number 3, provide you with so much flexibility in your deck building. They are the cornerstone of anything that is playing, any deck that is playing 2 or even 3 colors. It just would not be possible to consistently play 2 or 3 colors if you didn't have these cards in the card pool. So you've got 1 dual sight for each color combination. Starting in the top left, we've got air, fire. Oasis is giving us water, fire, and so on and so forth. So we've got 1 for each color combination. And of course, if you're playing across 3 different colors, you've got a lot of mana fixing there. So for example, if you're playing an earth, air, fire deck, you've got all those sights on the left-hand side, Ruin, Step, and Windmill. So that's 9 sights, which are duals, which are giving you really, really effective and strong mana fixing, or threshold fixing, I should say. So that's the reason that the dual sights find themselves in at number 1, and I think that anyone who pulls foils of these from Alpha is going to be a very happy customer indeed from any booster pack that's got a foil exceptional dual sight in it. And as a little nod, I'd like to note as well, just from a templating perspective, you can see it best on the Oasis, the Lighthouse, and the Step, I think, but the original Magic dual lands, you remember, had that kind of candy stripe effect in the text box with the color squares that radiated outwards. Eric, I think in a really nice touch here, has put a sort of colored tiling of sorts into the text box as well, where you've got the flavor text there. And I really like that little nod. Everyone, I think, enjoys the look of those original dual lands from Magic, and having both the effect harking back to those, but also that little visual cue as well, I think is a lovely touch. So to sum up, our list of top 10 sights from the Alpha set of Sorcery TCG, which you should definitely keep an eye out for if you are opening Alpha. We've got the dual element sights at number 1, the Geist Wood at number 2, Free City at number 3, Color Out of Space at number 4. I misspoke, I said 3, but it was actually 4. Towers, the basic towers at number 5, Cloud City at number 6, Gnome Hollows at 7, Pillar of Xeros at 8, Holy Ground at 9, and the basic villages at 10. So what do you think? Do you agree with my rankings? Probably Mirror Realm is one that's a bit unfortunate not to make it onto the list, but other than that, were there other sites that you think are going to prove to be powerhouses in Sorcery? Sleeping Giants, some hits that might come out of the woodwork later on, or just things that you think I flat out missed? Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying the Sorcery content, please do like the video, let me know you're enjoying it, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want to see future content. Thank you very much for being here. I've been Jesse Muleman Marshall, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.